time to say this is not open to the media. This is a closed call for the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. And so if you are a member of the media and have questions or would like to reach out to us, I invite you to hang up and email me directly, melissa@wcareachamber.org, and we'll be happy to get with you. This call is being recorded, so we'll be able to send this link out to you as well as those that weren't able to be on the call today. All right, Roxy.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm Roxy Deer with the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce, and I am managing the chat box today for this webinar. So on the bottom of your screen, you will see a task list. You should be muted. It's optional if you want to turn your camera on or not. I do recommend that you click the chat button, and on the right-hand side of your screen, a chat box will open. Throughout the day, if you have questions that you would like to ask, feel free to type those into the chat box. We're asking that questions come to me directly and that the full chat box will be used for resources. So if you have questions in the chat box, select to send it to me directly. And that way that our chat box will be full of resources for you. I'm going to go ahead and pop a poll onto the screen, and I want you to take a second to answer. This is just how we are helping to manage what's going on in our community. So we want to know what your top 3 concerns are in respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. So take a second and answer that question. Pick your top 3 answers, and that will help us engage with the programming that we're doing and also maybe provide extra resources for you. So we'll give you about a minute to answer that poll. Great, we're seeing some answers come in right now. Give you about 5 more seconds. Great. All right, so we're seeing very similar results to what we saw last week when we asked this question. And it seems like the biggest concern right now is the long-term recession that will have long-term financial impacts on businesses. Thank you for taking that poll. I'm going to hand it back over to Melissa, but remember, if you would like to ask questions throughout the webinar, you can send them to me personally in the chat box. Just select to Roxy Deer.
All right, so we are going to go ahead then and head to the next slide. Just to give you some insight on what we're going to do today. We've already done introductions. In just a minute, we're going to hear some great updates from what's been happening in Washington, D.C. Then we'll take some questions and answers. I know Roxy's already received a few questions. She'll be starting off with those and then add to it as we have time. We do plan to end today's call at 4 o'clock, so we may not get to all of your questions. If we don't, we'll follow up with the answers to those later. And then we'll give you some links to some additional resources and additional programming that might be of interest to you. So at this time, I want to introduce to you our special guest today. We are so incredibly pleased to have Representative Greg Pence with us. We were with you, Representative Pence, I can't remember what month it was. It was several months ago, maybe 6 months ago, when you came to visit us, and we had lunch together and had some Q&A. And we appreciated your time then, but now is probably one of the most critical times in your tenure as far as representing the the state of Indiana and what's going on here. And we're incredibly anxious to hear the updates that are coming from DC with the Relief Act. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Roxy, for having me here today. And hello to everybody that's joined us. I'm going to kind of give a quick overview, and then I've spent a great deal of time digging in and finding answers to questions I know you're going to have. So I'll get into that. But, you know, last Friday, the House and the Senate the day before passed the CARES Act, which was actually the third phase of a coronavirus, I'll call it attack or counterattack to this war on the coronavirus that we're having. That was a $2.2 trillion, as you know. It first and foremost addressed the health and safety of people in the United States. So there's an enormous amount of money and resources devoted to getting what's called the PP&E, the equipment, to the hospitals, to the states, to those that need it, the first care providers, as well as work on an antidote and support the hospitals and state health departments in implementing the plans that they have in place to offset or fight a pandemic or epidemic. So included in that, and I think that's probably what we'll get into a little more today since the poll indicated that, was support for business, for workers, middle class, and business. And I'll get into that a little bit, and then we'll have lots of questions on that. But remember, the first and most important thing is to protect everyone, and that's what the CARES Act was all about. Being phase 3, it was the third attempt as this virus has spread to make sure that we can take care of the people that have lost their jobs, been directly affected by the virus or indirectly affected. So with that, the CARES Act, from a business perspective, from a worker perspective, provides an expansion of unemployment and help for businesses of all sizes. Now, the vast majority of the dollars that went into the CARES Act actually go into the health support systems across the United States. But then there are other chunks. One goes to the big corporations that are critical to our national protecting our country and our infrastructure and the continuation of our country, like the airlines, okay, once we get back up and running. And then there are the small and medium-sized business provisions, and there's two different groups. There is the payroll protection program, and there is the small business debt relief program. The small business debt relief program is something that you obtain directly from the SBA, and that can be up to $2 million. It's at 3.75%. But I'm gonna tell everybody right off the bat, be careful. A loan like that is only available if you don't have the cash, the liquidity, or the line of credit. And I'll say more kind of about some of the limitations of these. On the payroll protection program loans, those are loans that can equal 2.5 months of your payroll, as long as you pay people for 8 weeks. And that, if you comply with the requirements of that loan, then it can be forgiven up to 100%. We don't have the details on what other restrictions and requirements you may have after you've gotten that money. We we're waiting for Mnuchin to issue those, which he said this weekend he would issue, how the Treasury and the IRS and the Department of Labor would administer both of those types of loans for small business. If you want for a second, I can get into the unemployment that we passed in phase 2. That's where folks can get up to $600 in addition to the unemployment that they may earn. And that has actually challenged a number of companies because it can be more lucrative to not work than to work. And, you know, if some folks want to ask some questions about.
Yes, in fact, I think that was one of the questions that we had already received for
Up to
our
now,
area.
working on the health and, what's that? So I've spent, go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say that is one of the questions that we had received, especially for our area with the wages, the level that they are here, that it somewhat disincentivizes workers to want to go back to work.
Well, again, you know, the most important thing is that we fight the virus here, and those that need to stay away from work, it's one thing. You know, if they have to care for a loved one, there is a provision now where they can get unemployment by voluntarily leaving their employer and going home and caring for a child. Of course, in phase 2, if you had to care for someone with the virus, that was an acceptable unemployment. But also, if your child is home, as all of the schools have been closed here in Indiana, you can get employment because of that. The way it works in Indiana, our Indiana program, as probably most of your listeners know, is you can get up to 47% of your current pay in unemployment. And at the top end of that is $43,000 is the max, times 47%, and that's just under $400. So if you have employees or you are thinking about doing this, you are looking at, if you're at 43,000 or above, you are looking at the possibility of getting $1,000 a week because of the enhancement of unemployment. And after I kind of worked on the bill, worked on talking to hospitals, health departments, I start in the last 4 or 5 days, I've been talking to businesses and banks, and I've heard that very thing, that, well, this is a better deal for my employees. And some of them have literally come to employers, and I heard 4 of those stories this morning where their employees said, well, I'm better off if I take the unemployment. And so we know that's a challenge. Am I still on the screen? I just went black.
We see you, yes.
Hello? Okay, you can see me good.
Yes.
Did that answer that question?
Absolutely.
We've had another question come in that some of service providers, specifically in this question, beauticians, are struggling to get their unemployment approved. And I'm sure this is happening in other self-employed businesses. Do you have any recommendations for those individuals?
No, unemployment is run by each state. Our state is known to have a pretty good system. If I would be very interested if they contact us at pence.house.gov to see why they're having a difficult time. Now, unemployment has been expanded to gig workers and self-employed workers. So that individual you're talking about should actually be able to get unemployment. There may be a little problems showing how much they've made and that type of thing, because they are their own employer, but they should be able to get that unemployment. So if it's possible for me to ask a two-way question, what's holding them up?
I'll let her respond back to that, and if I hear from her, I'll let you know.
Okay. You know, and this is over and above. Everyone under $75,000 is going to get $1,200 from the Treasury, and that goes to anyone that filed a tax return in 18 or 19 and made at least $2,500. And people can even file a tax return if they fail to do it in 18 or 19. Mnuchin, the Treasury, just announced today, if you go ahead and file a quick form, which would be at the IRS online, then you would be eligible for that $1,200. And that $1,200, if you got your tax refund or paid your tax electronically, it will come back that way. Otherwise, they will mail a check to you.
And at this time, when are you expecting that to hit mailboxes or hit bank accounts?
So they said 3 weeks. You know, the sooner the better. The rate, this was about 3 weeks ago. As a business person with a business background, I didn't really understand why we were giving $1,200 to federal employees, state employees, and the such. You know, people that have not lost their jobs and have jobs and have not been financially impacted by the coronavirus. The answer that we got from the administration, the Treasury, was there's no other way for us to get this money out into the economy as fast as the Treasury can. We can't do it through the unemployment, different 50 states unemployment programs. It won't go out that fast. They don't have the capacity. Many of them are more antiquated than we are here in Indiana.
Okay. Roxy, do you have another question for us?
I do. We are getting questions about when businesses should see the funds that are being released to small businesses via the Paycheck Protection Program loan. You know when that money will be dispersed?
Right. The Paycheck Protection Program, as I mentioned, that the bigger one, the Small Business Debt Relief Program, up to $2 million, that goes through SBA. The Paycheck Protection Program, all the people need to go to their local lender and apply for an SBA loan through their local lender, and they would be able to tell them how quickly they could process that. And let me share with y'all, some lenders are already hooked up and do a lot of SBA loans. Others not so much. Even some don't do any. So the process may be quicker than the other, but also in this CARES Act, we allocated dollars to expedite these loans.
Great, thank you. I did want to reiterate that this PDF that you're seeing on the screen, we will make available on our social media or through an email following up after this link. I know Mary Walker had asked for that and a few others already. So we will make this document, this PDF, available to you after. As well as this webinar will be linked on our YouTube page. It usually takes us about 24 hours to get it up on the screen. We do have another question. Let me pull it up here. For those nonprofits that may be on the call today, how will assistance flowing in that direction be different than the dollars going to businesses?
I really can't answer that specifically today. They would be, if your payroll protection program, I would go to the bank and ask how that would flow. Now, not all nonprofits are eligible for these loans, and we actually are addressing that. We left out churches and chambers. There's certain types of nonprofits. I don't think we intended to exclude them by what is a chamber? 501?
C6. We're a 501c6, correct, Melissa?
6. So yeah, we did 501(c)(3)s, and so that has been discussed even before we signed the bill and left. And the reason we couldn't make any modifications to the bill was it came over to the House from the Senate. If we had made modifications, we would have started the whole bill over again. And we thought, you know what, let's get this bill, let's get these loans set up, let's get the dollars rolling out, get the Treasury going, and we can always make changes and adjustments to the bill.
So do you see the C6s and the churches being added in the next round?
I'm not sure so much, Melissa, the next round. I think they might get added in corrections or, amendments to the bill. Okay, so not necessarily, there's a lot of talk about phase 4. If you notice today it came out, and I'd be very happy if what we do is focus on the infrastructure. To, go ahead and do the rural broadband, the roads, the bridges, the waters and the sewers. Let's spend money there in our economy and get people get jobs and people to work after we beat this virus. And so we could put it in there. We could make some of those changes in phase 4, but we've actually talked about doing it sooner than that.
I know that would be coming from the chamber side of things. We would love to see that happen sooner than later. Also, our tourism bureau and others are C6s as well. And as you can imagine, with nobody traveling right now, hotels are seeing a huge dip, if not complete stop to their
tons of conversations. I just let me share with you, since I think the middle of next week, I drove off to Washington DC to vote and then drove home, so I had a lot of time in the car and had a lot of conference calls set up with associations, and one of them was the Hotel Motel Association, and I've heard all about that. Another one is for any of the callers that are landlords, which is not uncommon for businesses. That's something that needs to be addressed, with the president and the governor here in the state of Indiana saying no foreclosures and no evictions. As a landlord myself, as a real estate owner, I've got to work with my tenants, and there is no relief in the CARES Act or any of the other phases for landlords and the relief that they would give to their tenants. And so that's something that there's a lot of talk about right now.
Thank you. We're getting a question, and I'm just going to read word for word so that you understand it, because it's a little gray to me. They want to know if you will be talking about business tax relief, employee retention tax credit, relaxation of business interest deduction limits, net operating loss carryback, ?
Yeah, that's all in the bill. And I would say the best thing to do, without getting too technical there, is we expanded the carry forward and carry back. If I can remember all the things that you asked about. What was the interest one? Say that one again.
They want to know if you are going to talk about, or if you have any information on the relaxation of business interest deduction limits.
Yes, that's in the bill as well. Okay, where there was a limitation on how much interest could be deducted. Now that is in this bill as well. I would encourage you to probably go to follow the IRS for the specific questions there, and of course your accountant. I've actually talked to many accountants and many banks, and they're all trying to get a handle on exactly how they would process the relief in this bill. And I think there were 4 of them. What are the other 2?
We want to hear about the business tax relief. Is that the employee retention tax credit?
Well, that goes to the Paycheck Protection Program. And that's a question of really how is that going to be processed? And we're waiting for details on that as well.
One question that came through, they seem to want to know how they can discern all the information we're getting. It's coming from every end, and a lot of our small business owners are feeling overwhelmed. What's your message to them?
Are we talking, I'm going to assume that that's a business question and not a virus question. You know, I think there are many opportunities to watch the president and my brother, the vice president, kind of give us updates on the virus and the progress, as well as on our website, pence.house.gov. We will provide virus factual information and updates on that. Now, as far as the updates on business, I'm not really giving you an answer as much as I'm cautioning all of the listeners out there to not go Google stuff and get interpretation of how this is actually going to work. Because I will tell you, if you contact the SBA or you contact your banker, they will tell you the same thing I'm about to tell you. We are waiting for clarification from the Treasury and the IRS. So no one has a better handle than the Treasury and the IRS, which after phase 2, they sent out along with labor, they sent out a very clear explanation of how and who could apply for unemployment if the coronavirus affected you personally, someone you're caring for, or you needed to take care of your children at home. So, but that came after. Again, I watch for the IRS, Treasury, and Labor by the end of this week to give good information on how this is going to work. And that's almost the biggest non-answer is we all did this so I could give answers, but really the answer is last night until about 7 o'clock at night, I was with all the executives of a very large bank, and we were discussing the lack of clarity, which I have shared with the administration, that they need to get answers out to everybody.
One of the best resources that we have seen come out from the U.S. Chamber, and we actually emailed this out to our email distribution list today. So if you're on the call and you're on our email distribution list, you probably got it. Just hold it up. But this document is so informative and really seems to break things down into everyday language for those of us that are not attorneys, we're not accountants. We try to be smart business people, but we don't have all the answers. And it's an excellent document. I encourage you, if you have not already looked at that, to do so. Oops, sorry about that. And if you need a copy of that, shoot us an email. I think you can email Roxy at wcareachamber.org, and she'll get that out to you. So, but as far as clarification and some links to who qualifies, in addition to this document that you just saw on your screen a few minutes ago, I think between the two, there are a whole lot of answers in here that just will take a little bit of reading, and you'll be at least a lot further along than we are right now.
Yeah, and that was great. That's great
Roxy,
info,
do you
Melissa.
have, next question in the queue?
Melissa, am I on mute?
If you have a question for Representative Pence, please send it in the chat box. You can send it to me directly where it says to Roxy, and then we will ask Representative Pence that question. what other updates do you have on how businesses can receive additional funding or support through this? Maybe not funding, but other additional support.
Right now, the two major programs, well, really three, are the unemployment component, because it's workers, small businesses, middle class, and really those two loans are those are that is the support for small businesses. Now there is the opportunity in the CARES Act to get counseling and things like that to be set up, to be provided to folks. But as far as getting this money to bridge, I agreed with what Melissa was saying, but I'd encourage everybody to go talk to your banker, because the payroll protection program is going to be administered by the bank, and credit requirements have not gone away. It's not just free money. So really the best thing for folks to do is go talk to their banker to see what they're eligible for.
So just for clarification, the local banks, so First Bank Richmond, West End Bank, Wayne Bank, some of those entities that are here serving our local community, they will be able to offer these SBA loans that you're talking about.
Yes. The payroll protection program, the bigger one, the debt relief program, which is really a disaster program, you go directly to the SBA site. And everyone on here, they can go to the SBA site for a description of these programs, but exactly how you're going to qualify, what you're going to have to do to comply, hasn't been promulgated yet. But certainly, I assure you that your banks are following this very closely all day, every day right now.
I think to reiterate your initial kind of overview about what's in this CARES Act, there are different programs: the Paycheck Protection Program, the Small Business Debt Relief Program, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and Emergency Economic Injury Grants. Those are different programs, and there are different qualifications for each.
Right. And the best thing to do is reach out to your local lender, any of the banks, and talk to them about being eligible, because each company is going to be very different on what their size is going to be different. Their eligibility is going to be different. And then how much they can get. Now, the payroll protection program requires that you actually keep the employees on the payroll for 8 weeks. So what we don't know is, well, if I've done that at the end of 8 weeks, that will be forgiven, but will I have to do anything else beyond those 8 weeks to comply with that? I can tell you some things business people generally ask, whether it's a $1,200 or the payroll protection loan, which can be forgiven. Both of those would not be taxable events. That's in the bill. Great. You would not have to pay tax on that next year.
We just received a question
that goes back to some discussion that was happening a few weeks ago, in that there could potentially be some payroll tax waivers, or payroll tax would be put on hold for a certain amount of time Is that off the table now, or is that still under discussion?
Well, yeah, Melissa, that the president wanted to do a payroll suspension. And that was not included in this bill. The way that the 8 weeks of pay would be paid back or forgiven, if you will, is from the end of the 8 weeks on. You wouldn't have to make payroll tax payments, but that's different. That's very different than what you were talking about. The president wanted to suspend payroll taxes.
Right.
That's not in this bill.
Roxy, do we have another question in the queue?
We do. We have a restaurant owner who's wanting to know when we can expect to see guests allowed back in to see restaurants and participate in eating all their delicious food.
Yeah, and I've been shut down for 3 weeks. I don't have a restaurant, but my businesses have been shut down, their retail, for 3 weeks now. So, I'd love to know that too. It's up to each state. So in this case, it's up to the governor. Thank God that our state isn't as bad off. While we do have a number of deaths, and we do have a growing infection, it is really nothing compared to what is happening in some of the other key counties. And I say counties because there's 3 counties where over 50% of all the growth in contamination is occurring. So hopefully with the spring coming, I think we're going to be I think it'll be the end of May. I'm sorry, the end of April. It won't be before then. Some other states have said June something, but those are states that are having a huge outbreak, and maybe they have to wait a little longer. The weather, what we're doing in identifying and quantifying the at-risk and separating the at-risk people. The fact that they are now doing over 100,000 tests a day, and that will ramp up each week. There will be more and more and more because the tests are being produced faster and faster. Once we get a better handle on things, then someone like my 87-year-old mother, who is the one that's going to have to stay home, and where we know the virus is contained, when we have better understanding of how it spreads, then I hope we can get back ASAP. I know, probably like you, Mr. Restaurant Owner, I know that China has opened restaurants back up. It's not open, the whole place isn't open. If you have 100 seats, they're only allowing 50 seats, and they're keeping the social distancing involved, but at least those folks are open. Let me assure you, from the very beginning here, health and safety was first, and then number 2 right behind was, hey, we can't shut this economy down. So I and almost all of my peers are saying, how can we get this economy back up and running? Because we can't destroy businesses and have no jobs left after we beat this virus. We need to keep the businesses, small business, the lifeline of America. We need to keep small businesses. We need to help them survive these 4 or 8 or 6 weeks.
Absolutely. Roxy, do we have another question?
Not right now, so I'm going to ask that you just give us any more updates that you may have. If you have a question for Representative Pence, drop it in the chat box to me directly so that we can ask him.
The only other thing I can, and maybe this is what I leave y'all with.
One of the things that I realize is at the state level, but you probably have some thoughts on this, and that is our educational institutions. Schools, K-12, have been shut down and now will be shut down, some of them for the rest of the school year. And colleges are dealing with the same things. do you have any insight, or what are your thoughts about how are these students keeping up? How are we going to reacclimate them into the educational cycle without finding them extremely behind?
I probably am too separated from how that's affecting students right now. My youngest is 30, has been out of school for a while, but I have talked. She was with her granddaughter who was telestudying, and because of the poor rural broadband we have in some parts of the 6th district, she wasn't able to submit her test that she was taking. She was attending lectures online, and she went to take a test, and she was able to get a hold of the professor and say, hey, I don't know why, but I'm unable to submit my test exam to you on time here, and she got a waiver. I actually took correspondence courses when I was in the Marine Corps, and that's when they sent you the book and the test. And, pretty much the whole book was a test. If people want to learn, they'll find a way to learn. And we have the best education system in the world. We have some phenomenal institutions. I'm on IUPUC's board here in Columbus, Indiana. I know you have Southeastern over there. I'm just confident that they're going to figure it out, and the students are going to figure it out. And as I think some of the challenges, and we have heard about this, but the funding issue, I would have to leave to some for a state school. They're probably in better shape than privates, and so there's different things that have to be addressed here.
Right. So what do you see as, if you could project forward over the next 2 to 3 weeks, what should we be on the lookout for?
Watching something other than the news on television.
Yes.
Well, I'm in the same boat as everybody else now. I had the honor of driving to DC and representing you all. And now I'm back home and I'm on the phone most of the time, talking to constituents or events like this or conference calls with leadership. I think it's possible as we go forward at the end of April, Congress may get back together to address some of these fixes and to address a phase 4. As I gather information like I am doing here, like, what about schools? What about the students? We'll bring those back together and either incorporate them in a phase 4 or make adjustments to the phase 3, the CARES Act we just did. And unfortunately, hopefully we have good weather. Hopefully the virus is contained, and we get back out sooner rather than later. But I think we're going to be hunkered down for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, I appreciate you being on the call today. Roxy, did we have one more question?
We did. With regards to hotels, most have had to reduce their staffing significantly since the beginning of COVID-19, with most of the current debt relief programs being tied to employment. Are there additional relief programs being considered? And if so, what will those possibly contain and when will they be enacted?
No, I'm going to be real frank. I've got some real good friends that are in the hotel business as well. In a sense, you have to weigh what's best for your employees, for you to pay them and get reimbursed, or for them to go on unemployment. Here in the short term, those are really kind of business decisions. They're decisions putting your employees first. There are no other programs planned specifically at this time for hotels. Having said that, I want to be careful. Those that are landlords, which in a sense are hotels, are all very much challenged in the same way. We were receiving rent on our, and rents have not been contemplated at all in the CARES Act. But as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a lot of talking about that right now too. So that, and you'll, even if you bother watching TV, you'll see on a lot of the financial programs that they're talking about that too. If you think Simon Properties, it goes on and on, apartment buildings, and including hotels, they are not receiving any revenue right now, yet property taxes, utilities, insurance, all that goes on.
Thank you.
And let me tell you, I'm keenly focused on that. Another thing I'm keenly focused on, and I'm getting off a little bit off topic here, but so I'm getting involved in there's business interruption insurance, which coronavirus is not, it's not a claim that you can go use against your business interruption insurance. A number of Congress people and I are talking about ways to reverse that, and we would have to shore up the insurance industry to get them to make good on those clauses in the insurance policies. Now, that's only if you had business interruption insurance. That would go a long way for an awful lot of hotels, an awful lot of landlords, awful lot of malls where they could simply be made whole for their lost rent. And that's, I say this a little tongue in cheek, don't hold your breath. That knowing's not going to happen real fast, because insurance companies, they don't like to pay anything quickly. And that's not a knock against insurance companies. That's just, I understand. And I think it's going to have to be an act of Congress that will help them help their insured.
Thank you. We had another question come in. What are the plans for the homeless and disenfranchised? How will their housing be addressed?
That is, as far as the CARES, so they will actually get the $1,200 if they filed a income tax, if they filed taxes last year. If they didn't, I don't really have an answer. That's not part of the CARES Act here. It breaks my heart there. I felt that we should get something to everyone that didn't have a job. But unfortunately, to get the money out as quickly as possible, it had to go through the Treasury. So, I pray that they're not left out.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that I've heard about here locally has been that some of the shelters have had to close their doors because of just the issue of potentially spreading the virus, or I'm not sure what all the reasonings were behind that, but there were people that were left out because some of those shelters had closed. And so I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but that is something that I've heard.
Well, another, we also know that a lot of the charitable support is really challenged at the moment for businesses that we're helping out, maybe providing food or donating money or time. Now, we can't donate time. We can't donate our treasure. We can't donate our talent. We have to beat this virus first and foremost.
Right. I will say that, just to give a shout out to our school systems, they have been taking the food truck out. They've been sending buses with meals. They've been opening their doors every single day.
Yeah, Melissa, Melissa, if I can say, in phase 2, we beefed that up. We funded that for states so that the SNAP program for meals to seniors and veterans, homeless veterans, that they would all be provided additional funding was provided to feed them. And that we did.
and just on behalf of our community, I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for that piece of it. We're seeing families impacted. Thank you for the relief package that's on the table, that we actually have something like this to get together and talk about today, that there is actually something out there for our businesses and individuals to reach out and latch a hold of when they need it. So we appreciate that. We know that this was not
Yeah.
an easy task for you all to get on the same page about.
Well, right. And well, that's an interesting thing. My glass is really half full here. I've never seen Congress, the Senate and the House, which are two different animals, get together so fast and in such agreement. And we walk out of there at about 1:45 last Friday, and we all said, you know what? We're going to do whatever we need to do here in the Congress, in the Senate, and we'll be back as soon as we can if more relief is needed. And so all these questions about what are we going to do about this and what are we going to do about that, we're going to do something about it. I think that this is America. We are going to do the right thing for the workers first and foremost, for the middle class and for the small businesses, the job creators. I just really believe that. I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to get this virus licked pretty good. As I've mentioned in some of my speeches on the floor, I'm very proud of my brother and the job he's done. We started from zero. I mean, who could possibly imagine that we're going to find out in the middle of January that there's a pandemic coming, and then actually being able to contain it to a certain extent right now. I've called the hospitals around our district. I've talked to the health folks. They were worried weeks ago about getting masks and gowns and ventilators. They have enough right now. That didn't happen accidentally. I think it's everybody pitching together. And our first responders, to go into the hospital every day, I'm washing my hands, I'm avoiding doing certain things. They have to go into the fight every day, into the breach. You can only say some prayers for them. But I think we're going to beat it. We're going to lick it. We really are. So my glass is half full.
I agree. I think we've got a great group of business owners. We've got a great group of legislators and leaders that are going to help get us through this. It's amazing, like you said, how quickly things are coming together. A couple weeks ago, this pandemic still felt so far away, and now it's very real. It's very much in our backyard. But at the same time that we Hoosiers are starting to feel it, the relief hit. And so we have this to focus on now, which is great. Thanks so much
Yeah,
for
and
your time with us today. We appreciate it. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for having me, and God bless everybody. Stay safe, and tell your parents and grandparents, stay home. Don't go out.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to hit on just a couple things before everyone jumps off the call. We are having these calls weekly. We have another one next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Stay tuned. We have some conversations going about who may be our guests next week, but know for sure it's going to be interesting conversation. In the meantime, if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to our office. We are working remotely. We're practicing social distancing and staying in ourselves. But you can reach us on email at any time. First name at wcareachamber.org. And then a special shout out for an event we're doing tomorrow. And I'm going to let Roxy talk about this because she's taking the lead on our Google series.
Thanks, Melissa. This event is Thursday, actually. It's April 2nd at 11:30. We have partnered with Google, Get Your Business Online with Google, to provide you a free workshop to make sure that you're utilizing all of Google's free business resources, including making sure that your business is searchable, that your contact information is up to date. This will be a 3-part series. We're going to do one a week, but you can register for free and receive all of the Google things that they're offering businesses for free. And this is a great event. We've done this one about a year ago, but the content is fresh and it's new, and they're actually building some webinars specifically for this time in history. And so the resources are going to be even more important to our small business owners, our service providers, business owners in the community. You want to be there. You want to attend this event. And I've linked the Facebook event in the chat box, along with some other resources from the Indiana Chamber, the U.S. Chamber, and I've also put our email addresses in the chat box as well if you have more questions.
All right. Well, thanks again to everyone for jumping on the call today. We will send out the link to this recording. And so if you know of people that would benefit from this information, please feel free to forward that link or post it on your social media sites. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.